Some storms don't arrive to destroy you. They show up to reveal exactly who should never have had access to you in the first place. That's the strange thing about humiliation rituals. They're never really designed to test your weakness. They're built to expose someone else's obsession with control. And the moment you refuse to crumble, the entire script flipped in a way nobody in the room was prepared for. One psychological study even noted that people who don't react to public embarrassment trigger more discomfort in the observers than the target, because your calm becomes a mirror, and suddenly everyone sees their own insecurity looking back at them. And that's exactly what happened here. Your humiliation wasn't just a moment. It was a malfunction in a system that relies on predictable human reactions. You didn't break down, you didn't play the role, and you definitely didn't give them the emotional episode they rehearsed. Instead, you stood there with the kind of composure that makes powerful people whisper, "Wait, who did we just try this on?" It rattled them, not because you fought back, but because you didn't need to. They expected fireworks and got a silent psychological checkmate. And let's be honest, the way you handled it had a sprinkle of dark humor. It's like someone planned an entire dramatic theater performance and you showed up without reading your lines, shrugged, and walked right off stage while they were still monologuing. Nothing terrifies orchestrators more than realizing their production has no effect on the main character. So now you have their attention, not the casual kind, the heavy kind, the kind that comes from people watching a situation they created spin out of their control, all because you chose to stay centered instead of shattered. This is the moment everything changed, not because they humiliated you, but because you exposed what they never wanted anyone to see. You are unshaken, unmoved, and unmanageable. And that is the real reason your humiliation ritual landed in the eyes of some dangerously powerful people. Number one, they studied your breaking point and realized you don't have one. Most people have a moment where they mentally buckle under pressure. It might be a look, a comment, a situation that hits a soft spot or exposes something they'd rather hide. The whole purpose of a humiliation ritual is to find that exact moment, the crack where a person stops being composed and starts being controllable. But when they tried it on you, something unexpected happened. Nothing. You didn't snap, you didn't shut down, and you didn't melt into the reaction they anticipated. You stayed present, grounded, and fully aware, and that's when they realized the uncomfortable truth. Your breaking point isn't where ordinary people fall apart. This wasn't strength in the dramatic sense. It wasn't some heroic rise above adversity. It was something far more unsettling to the people watching. You responded like someone whose self-worth isn't tied to the situation. You didn't give them emotional access. You didn't hand over the keys to your mind. And that's a level of internal control most people can't maintain under pressure. It made them step back and study you differently, not as someone going through something, but as someone they seriously underestimated. What frightened them most was that you didn't need to fight back to prove you were unaffected. Your calm wasn't fake. It wasn't forced. It was the kind of calm that comes from a person who's already faced things far heavier than whatever petty performance they orchestrated. They didn't break you because they couldn't reach the part of you they wanted to get their hands on. That's when they realized you weren't participating in their ritual. You were observing it. Your reaction exposed their weakness instead of yours. They planned to test you, but ended up revealing themselves. And in that moment, they saw something they rarely encounter, a person who isn't ruled by panic, shame, or public opinion. They saw someone who doesn't collapse under pressure, because pressure is something you've already made peace with. And once they saw that, they understood the truth they didn't want to admit. You're not someone they can break, because you've outgrown the very tools they use to control people. Number 2, you exposed what happens when shame has nowhere to land. Humiliation rituals are designed to stick. They're carefully crafted to leave marks, mental, emotional, and sometimes even social. Every whispered insult, every staged, awkward moment, every pointed look is meant to land somewhere inside you, to lodge in your self-image and make you question your value. That's how the system works. It finds the soft spot and presses until you react. But when it came to you, there was nowhere for it to stick. You didn't recoil, you didn't falter, and you didn't even flinch. The energy that was supposed to land on you just hung there, awkward, ineffective, and glaringly obvious to everyone in the room. That's when they realized something terrifying. They were facing someone whose shame has nowhere to live. The moment is subtle but profound. People don't usually see humiliation fail this way. Most targets internalize, replay the embarrassment over and over, and allow it to shape their next moves. You didn't do that. You treated it like a weightless object, something to observe, something to catalog, not something that could infiltrate your sense of self. And because of that, you didn't just survive the ritual, you exposed it for what it really was, an exercise in control that only works if the target believes in its power. Powerful people watching you realized this immediately. They saw their tools they've used to bend others, fail spectacularly. Their strategies, rehearsed for months, bounced off you without leaving a scratch. And the more they watched, the more they understood that their humiliation wasn't landing on you, it was reflecting back on them. It showed their obsession with control, their fear of unpredictability, and their assumption that everyone has a breaking point. You didn't. You became the mirror they didn't want to see, and that is far more unnerving than someone crumbling. When shame has nowhere to land, it loses its power completely. It doesn't vanish, it backfires. And watching it backfire on the people who thought they were untouchable is exactly what made your presence in that moment unforgettable, dangerous, and deeply unsettling to those who thought they had the upper hand. Number 3, you demonstrated that fear is reversible, but self-respect isn't. Most people think fear is the ultimate weapon. They believe if they can make someone afraid, they can control them. Humiliation rituals thrive on that assumption. They expect panic, embarrassment, hesitation, or desperate attempts to please. They expect a temporary collapse that signals submission. But when they targeted you, something extraordinary happened. They saw fear appear and then vanish, like a wave that rises and recedes, leaving the shore intact. You showed them that fear is temporary. It can exist, it can even sting, but it doesn't define you. It doesn't dictate your choices, your posture, or your dignity. That realization alone makes people in power nervous, because they aren't used to seeing someone who experiences fear without being chained by it. Even more threatening to them was your self-respect. Fear can be fleeting, but the quiet, unshakable conviction you carried, the sense that you owe yourself nothing less than integrity and nothing more than honesty, remained untouched. That's the part that terrified them. Most people bend, cringe, or apologize in ways that chip away at their self-worth, even subconsciously. You didn't. Every insult, every calculated humiliation, every gaze designed to destabilize you bounced off that inner boundary. They expected the fear to translate into self-deprecation, into a crack in your armor. Instead, they found that your core respect for yourself was untouchable, immovable, and completely separate from the momentary tremors of fear they could create. What made this even more alarming was the rhythm of it. They could see fear flicker, register its presence, and then evaporate. But the foundation beneath it, the part of you that won't compromise who you are, remained solid. To powerful people, this is dangerous because control relies on predictable reactions. When someone fears something, it can be measured, manipulated, and exploited. But when someone can feel fear without letting it erode their principles, they become unpredictable. They become untouchable in ways the orchestrators cannot anticipate. That's exactly what you showed in that moment. Fear is a tool, but self-respect is a fortress. And once they saw that, they knew they were facing someone who couldn't be owned, manipulated, or intimidated. Number 4, your reaction revealed who the real audience was. Humiliation rituals are designed with a simple assumption. The target will care more about themselves than anyone else in the room. The orchestrators expect you to panic, to blush, to stammer, and to reveal cracks they can exploit. That's the audience they imagined. You reacting, providing the entertainment. But when it came to you, that illusion shattered. You didn't center your energy on their expectations. You didn't perform for them. You shifted your focus elsewhere, and in doing so, you revealed the real audience, the people behind the performance, the ones who wanted to see you fail, but were themselves under scrutiny by their peers. That subtle inversion of attention is something few can pull off, and it's deeply unsettling to those who thrive on manipulation. Your reaction was calm, precise, and detached, and that's exactly what made them uneasy. By refusing to validate their assumptions, you forced them to see themselves. Every calculated insult, every staged awkward moment, and every orchestrated pressure point bounced back on the observers, exposing their own fears, insecurities, and compulsions to dominate. They had been hiding behind a ritual, thinking it would shield them from judgment, but you silently turned the spotlight on them. That's when they realized the humiliation wasn't for the crowd. It was for them. The brilliance of this is in its simplicity. Power often disguises itself as control, but real power is always observed. They thought you were the performer. You showed them they were. Every twitch, every strained laugh, every overplayed gesture became part of a reflection they didn't anticipate. You didn't just survive the ritual. You redefined it in real time, transforming the spectacle into a mirror that revealed motives, weakness, and obsession. In that moment, the whole dynamic shifted. The ritual lost its intended purpose, and you became the silent force observing the manipulators rather than being observed. You showed that mastery isn't in reaction, but in awareness, and that awareness exposed who truly mattered in the room. And that is the exact reason powerful people started to pay attention, not to control you, but to understand you, and to measure the threat of someone who sees the system for what it is. Number 5, they noticed you treated the ordeal like data, not drama. Most people react to humiliation like it's a performance they have to survive. Their hearts race, their thoughts scramble, and every instinct screams to explain, justify, or apologize. That's exactly what the ritual is designed to provoke, a chaotic response that can be observed, analyzed, and used to manipulate. But you didn't do that. You treated the entire ordeal like data. Every glance, every whisper, every staged insult was logged, analyzed, and cataloged in real time. Nothing about you was frantic, desperate, or reactive. You didn't give them the chaos they expected. You gave them clarity instead. That's what made your presence so unnerving. By observing rather than reacting, you flipped the script completely. What was meant to destabilize you became a window into the mechanics of their behavior. They began to realize that their power relied entirely on emotional manipulation, and you weren't supplying the raw material they needed. They could orchestrate the entire scenario, but it didn't matter. You were already several steps ahead, seeing patterns they assumed only they could control. Every subtle tactic, every attempt to provoke shame, every carefully calculated gesture became a piece of information to you, not a weapon against you. That kind of detachment is rare, and it's exactly why it triggered a level of fear in observers that humiliation itself could never reach. The brilliance in your approach lies in the contrast. While everyone else in the room expected drama, spectacle, and emotional breakdown, you provided none of it. You were not performing, you were analyzing, and that made the manipulators uncomfortable in ways words cannot capture. They realized they were no longer the architects. They were being studied, measured, and understood. When humiliation becomes data instead of a crisis, the power dynamic collapses. You aren't just surviving the situation, you are gaining insight from it, building a mental map of every motive, flaw, and insecurity in the room. And that is why they began to notice you, not as someone to control, but as someone impossible to predict, impossible to manipulate, and quietly dangerous in the most subtle, undeniable way. Number 6, your silence didn't confuse them. Your clarity did. Silence in a humiliation ritual is usually a weapon wielded by the orchestrators, a vacuum meant to make the target feel exposed, awkward, and desperate to fill the space. Most people panic when confronted with that emptiness. They speak too fast, apologize too much, or react with nervous laughter, and the manipulators feed on that. But your silence was not the confusion they expected. It wasn't hesitation or weakness. It was clarity, calm, deliberate, and almost surgical in its precision. And that is what unnerved them far more than any reaction ever could. They watched, expecting to see someone scrambling to justify themselves, and instead, they saw someone fully present, absorbing the moment, observing the room, and processing it with a quiet intelligence that refused to be hurried or manipulated. That kind of calm is rare, and it forces the observers to confront something they weren't prepared for, the realization that their power depends entirely on the target's participation. Your silence made them painfully aware that you were not participating. Every glance, every calculated humiliation, every whispered jab bounced off without leaving a dent. They were used to seeing chaos, but what they saw in you was composed, aware, and untouchable. The effect of your clarity was like a mirror held up to them. While they expected to provoke and control, you revealed the predictability of their methods. They began to squirm, not because you had reacted, but because your stillness highlighted the absurdity and futility of their actions. It forced them to confront their own insecurities, their own need for control, and their own obsession with dominance. Clarity in the face of manipulation is disarming. It is quiet but terrifying, because it cannot be bargained with, it cannot be startled, and it cannot be owned. Your silence was not a void. It was a signal that the target they thought they were controlling had no cracks to exploit, no panic to harvest, and no vulnerability to feed upon. That is why, in that moment, your clarity became more powerful than any reaction, leaving them unsettled, exposed, and painfully aware that they had underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. Number 7, you refused the role. They assigned you, and that's forbidden. Humiliation rituals are built on predictability. Every gesture, every insult, every orchestrated moment is designed to push you into a role they've already written. The ashamed, the apologetic, the panicked, the submissive. That role is the currency of control. When you step into it, you validate the ritual, you confirm their power, and you allow yourself to be owned, even if only temporarily. But you refused. You didn't play the part. You didn't stumble through the lines they had rehearsed for you. You didn't act embarrassed or weak. That refusal is what makes their power structures shiver, because it's a rebellion they didn't anticipate. It's forbidden because it exposes the entire system as a construct, not a law. When they realized you weren't complying, there was a subtle panic in the room. The ritual relies on the target's submission, and submission didn't arrive. They expected you to be the main character in their narrative, but instead you became an observer, an analyst, someone whose presence reframed the entire performance. Every insult they threw, every awkwardly staged moment, bounced back, highlighting their desperation rather than your weakness. You were no longer participating. You were controlling the perception of the moment without even moving. That's dangerous to anyone who wants predictable outcomes because it removes the certainty that makes them feel safe. Your refusal didn't have to be loud or aggressive. It wasn't about defiance for the sake of defiance. It was quiet, methodical, and unshakable. That made it worse for them. The people orchestrating the ritual rely on control, but you showed them control is only as strong as the compliance it receives. No compliance, no control. They were forced to see that their powerful act only worked if you agreed to play their part, and you didn't. By refusing the role, you exposed the ritual itself as a fiction. You revealed their insecurities, their obsession with dominance, and their reliance on predictable human behavior. That is what makes your response not just impressive, but profoundly unsettling. You didn't just survive the humiliation, you invalidated it entirely, showing that real authority doesn't come from forcing someone into a role, it comes from refusing to be cast at all. Number 8, you didn't seek revenge, you went after understanding. Most people react to humiliation with an immediate urge to strike back, to make the instigator feel the same discomfort, to reclaim some sense of control through retaliation. That's the default response, and it's predictable. It's messy, emotional, and exactly what the orchestrators expect. But you didn't react that way. You didn't lash out or plot revenge. Instead, you approached the situation with curiosity, observation, and understanding. You analyzed why the ritual existed, why it was aimed at you, and what it revealed about the people behind it. That approach isn't just rare, it's unsettling. People who rely on manipulation expect predictable responses, but your calm, strategic focus threw them entirely off balance. By seeking understanding instead of revenge, you elevated yourself above the chaos. While they were busy orchestrating, watching, and hoping for a collapse, you were quietly dissecting motives, patterns, and weaknesses. Every insult, every awkward setup, every calculated jab became data. You didn't give them the satisfaction of a fight, the entertainment of a reaction, or the confirmation that their actions mattered. Instead, you turned the experience into insight, turning their energy against itself without even lifting a finger. That kind of mental maneuvering terrifies manipulators because it's invisible, almost untouchable. They can't measure it or contain it, and it leaves them exposed in a way that brute reaction never could. Your approach also demonstrated a deeper power, restraint. Power isn't always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it's the ability to sit in the storm without flinching, to see every detail, and to process it with a mind that remains entirely your own. By choosing understanding over revenge, you removed yourself from their narrative, refused to be a pawn, and reclaimed agency in a space designed to strip it away. In the eyes of those orchestrating the ritual, this shift is dangerous. They can manipulate anger, shame, or fear, but insight, observation, and detachment are untouchable. You became the kind of person whose mind cannot be cornered, whose reactions cannot be predicted, and whose power grows silently as others flail in desperation. By choosing understanding, you didn't just survive. You became the quiet architect of control in a room built for chaos. Number 9, they saw you turn disgrace into leverage. Humiliation is meant to strip someone of value, to make them feel small, weak, and exposed. It's supposed to leave marks on reputation, ego, and confidence. Most people absorb that energy, letting it erode their presence and decision-making. But you didn't. You didn't just withstand the disgrace. You transformed it into leverage. Every insult, every staged awkwardness, every attempt to shame you became a tool for observation and insight. Instead of crumbling, you gathered information. Instead of faltering, You sharpened your awareness. That shift isn't just impressive. It's threatening to anyone who relies on manipulation because it takes their energy and turns it against them. What made this especially potent was how subtle it was. You didn't announce that you were benefiting from the moment. You didn't gloat or react aggressively. You simply allowed the humiliation to flow through you and, in doing so, revealed a fundamental truth. Leverage isn't about force, it's about control over perception. While they intended to weaken you, they ended up giving you a window into their motives, insecurities, and methods. Every move they made, every orchestrated awkward glance, and every pointed word became a map of their weaknesses. You weren't diminished by the experience, you were elevated by it. That transformation is what made them uncomfortable. They expected you to shrink, to apologize, to internalize the shame. Instead, you turned it into clarity, turning the ritual into a study in their own behavior. You became not just untouchable, but influential in ways they hadn't intended. Every moment they thought they were asserting power, they were feeding your understanding, giving you leverage over future encounters. Turning disgrace into leverage requires more than composure. It requires awareness, strategy, and an unshakable sense of self. You didn't just survive the ritual, you rewrote it. You demonstrated that humiliation only has power if you grant it any. By refusing to be diminished and instead converting the entire experience into insight and strength, you became the kind of person who thrives in chaos, leaving those who tried to control you scrambling to comprehend how their weapon became your advantage. Number 10, you made their ritual. Look amateur. Humiliation rituals are meticulously planned performances. Every gesture, every word, every staged reaction is designed to create the illusion of control, to make the target appear small and powerless. The organizers practice it like a script, expecting precise responses. But when it came to you, all of that planning unraveled in real time. What they thought would be a sophisticated exercise in dominance ended up looking sloppy, desperate, and almost laughable. You didn't give them the drama they needed, and suddenly their carefully constructed spectacle revealed its fragility. The shock of it wasn't just in your reaction, or lack thereof. It was in the contrast. They expected a performance from you, and what they got instead was presence, awareness, and calm. Every awkward pause, every orchestrated insult, every manipulative gesture they had rehearsed collided with your composure, exposing the ritual's weaknesses. What was meant to humiliate became a reflection of their own flaws. Their timing faltered, their threats lost weight, and their control slipped. To anyone observing, it looked like they were struggling to keep a performance together while the supposed target remained untouchable. This is what makes the moment so powerful. You didn't actively sabotage them. You didn't make a scene or call them out. You simply existed in a way that made their artifice obvious, and that realization hit them harder than any confrontation could have. They weren't seeing you as unbreakable. They were seeing themselves as clumsy, amateurish, and predictable. Every calculated insult, every manipulative pause, every attempt at orchestration backfired, not because you fought it, but because you refused to validate it. In that room, control shifted subtly but unmistakably. You became the standard by which their competence, or lack of it, was measured. The humiliation they intended to impose on you ended up being a mirror reflecting their own insecurities and failures. You didn't just survive the ritual, you exposed it as flimsy, ineffective, and entirely dependent on your compliance. By making their performance look amateur, you claimed a silent victory that no reaction could have achieved, leaving them exposed and questioning everything they thought they understood about power and control. Number 11, they realized you don't fear being seen, you fear being misunderstood. Humiliation rituals are built on visibility. The people behind them believe that if they can make someone exposed, embarrassed, or awkward, they gain control. Most people fear being seen in those moments. They fear the judgment, the ridicule, the momentary collapse that makes them feel small. But you operate differently. You don't fear being seen. You've learned long ago that people will always have opinions, and that visibility alone can never touch the core of who you are. What you fear and what you guard carefully is being misunderstood. That subtle difference is what threw the orchestrators completely off balance. When they attempted to humiliate you, they assumed they were targeting fear of exposure. Instead, they found someone who could face the room without flinching, someone whose presence didn't bend under scrutiny. Their gestures, insults, and setups landed on someone who didn't shrink or try to hide, and that reality began to unsettle them. They realized immediately that they were dealing with a person whose boundaries don't rely on others' perceptions. You weren't performing for them, apologizing for being human, or trying to justify your actions. You were simply being yourself, clear and unshakable, and that made every attempt to manipulate completely ineffective. The moment they recognized this, the entire power dynamic shifted. They had assumed that fear could be used as a lever, that public exposure would create leverage over you, and that humiliation would force compliance. But you showed them that fear is meaningless if it isn't paired with misunderstanding. You allowed yourself to be seen without granting them the power to define you. And because of that, the ritual stopped working the way it was supposed to. This realization is dangerous to manipulators because it removes their predictive power. They cannot exploit someone who doesn't bend to being observed. They can only exploit someone who fears misinterpretation. You made that distinction in the quietest, most unshakable way, turning a situation meant to control you into a demonstration of autonomy. You didn't just survive being watched. You rewrote what it means to be observed, showing that your value is determined by you, not by anyone else's judgment. Number 12, you broke the hidden rule. You stayed present. Humiliation rituals rely on distraction. They count on the target fleeing mentally, retreating into panic, shame, or self-doubt. The orchestrators expect your mind to scatter, your focus to fracture, and your energy to escape the room while your body stays. That's the hidden rule everyone follows. You are supposed to be anywhere but fully here. But you broke it. You stayed present. You didn't hide, you didn't dissociate, and you didn't let your thoughts spiral into imagined judgments or future regrets. You owned the moment with every ounce of awareness, and that simple act shattered the entire system they had set up. Being fully present in a moment designed to humiliate requires a different kind of strength. Most people respond with noise, excuses, laughter, shame, or defensiveness because they are trying to escape the discomfort. You responded with clarity, with attention, and with a refusal to give them the leverage they expected. Every staged insult, every awkward gesture, every attempt to provoke anxiety landed on someone whose mind wasn't elsewhere. That's unsettling to people who rely on manipulation because it removes the only variable they think they control, the target's focus. They had assumed they could push, prod, and pressure you into submission, but you didn't leave the room mentally. You were not just enduring, you were absorbing, processing, and understanding. Staying present transformed the ritual into something completely different. You weren't just surviving, you were learning, cataloging, and quietly turning the experience into insight. Every flaw in their approach, every overplayed gesture, every tiny crack in their control became visible to you, not because you sought it, but because you refused to be mentally absent. They realized too late that their attempts to dominate had handed you power instead, and their own failures were now glaringly obvious. Presence in the midst of chaos is a kind of quiet, terrifying mastery. You didn't need to react, to argue, or to defend yourself. You simply stayed in the moment, fully aware, fully unshaken, and fully in control. And that is why the people orchestrating the ritual saw you not as a participant, but as someone whose mind they could never corner or predict. Number 13. They saw that you're the type who learns faster under attack. Most people falter under pressure. When humiliation hits, it scrambles the mind, frays nerves, and slows thinking. That's why rituals like this exist. They assume stress will equal submission, that discomfort will cloud judgment and create predictable reactions. But you proved something entirely different. Under the exact conditions meant to destabilize you, you became sharper. Every insult, every awkward pause, every calculated attempt at embarrassment didn't weaken you. It educated you. You absorbed information faster than anyone could anticipate, mapping motives, spotting insecurities, and understanding the mechanics of control as they tried to impose it. That's not just resilience. That's the kind of awareness that makes manipulators deeply uneasy. They watched, expecting hesitation and vulnerability, but instead they saw mental agility. Your mind wasn't spiraling. It was observing, analyzing, and cataloging every detail. Every attack became a lesson. Every attempt to destabilize became a blueprint for insight. You weren't reacting emotionally. You were learning strategically, turning pressure into clarity. And that's the exact moment they realized they were dealing with someone unpredictable. Most targets under attack respond with fear or shame. You responded with observation and growth, and that unpredictability is a threat to anyone who thrives on control. What made it even more unnerving was the quiet efficiency of your process. You didn't need to show off your awareness. You didn't need to lecture or point out their flaws. You simply absorbed everything, and your calm, composed presence highlighted their failures without a word. They began to understand that while they were performing, you were learning, and learning faster than they were even aware. Being able to learn under attack is dangerous, because it transforms moments of weakness into opportunities for advantage. You turned their ritual into your classroom, their attempts to harm into your insight, and their energy into knowledge. And that is why they started to pay attention, not just to what you were doing, but to what you were quietly building. A mind that grows stronger under pressure, a presence that can't be anticipated, and a person who cannot be controlled. Number 14. They finally understood. You're not afraid of losing what they can take. Humiliation rituals are designed to exploit fear, the fear of losing reputation, comfort, approval, or social standing. They thrive on the assumption that these losses are unbearable, that they are the levers through which someone can be controlled. Most people collapse because they tie their value to what others can influence or take away. But you operate differently. You made it clear that the things they could threaten were meaningless to you. They couldn't intimidate you with shame, manipulate you with embarrassment, or corner you with social pressure, because your worth doesn't depend on what anyone can take. That realization is what made them truly uneasy, and it's also what makes you untouchable in ways most people can't even comprehend. They watched, expecting panic, hesitation, and compromise, but found none. Every carefully constructed insult, every staged situation, and every attempt to unsettle you landed on someone who had nothing to lose in the way they imagined. That lack of fear isn't arrogance, it's clarity. You know where your value lies, and it isn't in the hands of others. By refusing to bow to their expectations, you exposed a frightening truth. Their power is entirely dependent on your willingness to care about it, and you simply didn't. What made this even more unsettling to them is the ripple effect. People who rely on control expect compliance because fear is assumed to be universal. When they realized that their influence had no effect on you, They were forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that they were powerless in the presence of someone who refuses to be manipulated by threats. Every move they made, every attempt to provoke, every look of judgment fell flat. You didn't just withstand the situation. You demonstrated a type of independence that cannot be bought, bargained with, or coerced. This is why they finally understood that you are a force beyond their reach. They saw that real power isn't in what others can take. It's in refusing to let them hold anything over you. You didn't just survive their humiliation. You revealed the futility of their attempts to control anyone who has mastered themselves. And that clarity, that freedom from fear, is the ultimate kind of dominance. They saw it, and they could not ignore it. In the end, what began as a carefully orchestrated attempt to humiliate you became the stage on which your true strength, awareness, and composure were revealed. Every move they thought would break you, every insult meant to wound, every moment designed to expose weakness, instead highlighted your clarity, resilience, and mastery over yourself. You turned fear into insight, shame into leverage, and pressure into understanding. The very tools they wielded to dominate became the instruments by which you observed, learned, and rose above. What they didn't anticipate was that you operate on a different level. Fear is temporary, self-respect is untouchable, and humiliation only works when you let it. You refused to play the role they assigned, stayed fully present, and transformed every attack into knowledge and opportunity. You didn't just survive, you rewrote the rules. You exposed the fragility behind their orchestrated power, revealed their reliance on predictability, and showed that true strength lies in refusing to be owned by anyone's script. This is not just survival, it's dominance without aggression, clarity without chaos, and power that cannot be measured or contained. The people watching realize too late that control isn't taken by force, it's surrendered by compliance. And you surrendered nothing. You became the observer, the strategist, the untouchable presence in a room built to break others. In that realization lies your quiet victory, the kind that leaves a lasting impression, commands attention, and shifts the balance entirely. If this story resonated with you, if it made you see strength, awareness, and composure in a new light, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to the channel to catch more insights like this. Like, comment, and share, so others can see what it means to rise above manipulation and emerge untouchable. Your support helps keep these truths alive and spreading, and together we can learn to navigate the world with power, clarity, and unshakable presence. Stay blessed always.